Okay.
All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Averill Park Central School District Board of Education meeting on this Monday, February 1st, 2021. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I wanted to make sure everybody was introduced. So I will start with the board. I'm Jessica Swag. I'm the president of the Board of Education at this point in time. And we'll go through. Peter, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Peter Schaefer. I'm Vice President of the Board of Education.
Chris?
Oops, Chris Foster, board member.
Anne?
Anne Maroney, board member.
Megan?
Megan McGarry, board member.
Thank you. Samantha?
Samantha Hicks, board member.
Thank you. And Doug?
Doug Kelly, board member.
Thank you. Jim, do you want to introduce yourself and your administrative staff?
Sure. Jim Franchini, superintendent. Michael?
Michael Wieman, assistant superintendent for business.
Matt Haley, assistant superintendent for teaching and learning.
Kim Nugent, director of personnel development.
Linda?
Yeah, Linda.
Linda Primo, district clerk.
Okay. And Mark Bubniak, who is our athletic director. Do you want to introduce yourself and then your coaching staff?
Sure. Mark Bubniak, director of athletics. Rachel, go ahead.
Rachel Brown, athletic trainer.
Penny.
Penny Spence, varsity competitive cheer coach.
Mike.
Mike Malenfant, varsity wrestling coach.
Dave.
Evening, I'm Dave Puglisi. This is going to be my 18th year as a varsity boys basketball coach.
And Sean.
Hi, I'm Sean Organ. I'm the varsity girls basketball coach.
Thank you.
Thank you all. And our directors of nursing, would you guys like to introduce yourselves?
Val Miller.
And Rebecca Everett.
Thank you. I think that's everyone that's on the screen. Yes? Okay. So that brings us to agenda item number 2, which is public comment, and community members seeking to provide questions or comment to the Board of Education should email them to the district clerk, and her email is on the board agenda. Comments and questions that are received before the conclusion of the board meeting will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. And as of the time we started this meeting, we have received more than 20 emails. So thank you out there to those who have shared their thoughts. And the entire board has been copied on those emails. Okay. Brings us to item number 3, the discussion on the high-risk winter sports. And I would like to start the discussion by saying that I'm very frustrated that the state opened up the indoor athletics for local entities to decide upon while the virus is still continuing to rage across our country. But here we are. And I would like to thank everyone who had supplied really good information prior to this meeting. It did give us, the board members, some time to review that and contemplate all the information that was provided. And we appreciate that. I do understand the multiple benefits the sports bring to the overall health and well-being of our student athletes. But I do want to remind everyone that this risk in a pandemic is much larger than just our student athletes. And therefore, it's very different than other decisions we have been asked to make in the past around athletics, and frankly, other activities that impact our student engagement and our students' well-being. And with how this virus spreads and how contagious it is, this plan, like our reopening plan we discussed in August, affects just more than our students. It affects our entire community. So I do have many concerns, and I will start with my first one, and then I will open it up to the rest of the board. Like I said, if we can just try to be respectful and make sure everybody has their chance to speak, that would be helpful. My concern is that the New York State Department of Health guidance, the New York State Public High School Athletic Association guidance, and even our own plan states, and I will quote it, read it, responsible parties must ensure a distance of at least 6 feet is maintained among individuals at all times, whether indoor or outdoor, unless safety or the core activity requires a shorter distance. If a shorter distance is required, individuals must wear acceptable face covering. And it goes on from there. To me, it is alarming that face coverings are not required at all times during any indoor activity, especially when the data shows the effectiveness of wearing masks. And 6 feet away with the new virus strain that is out there, I still feel is very risky. I don't think this guidance goes far enough to protect our students and subsequently our family and our families in the community. And I know all you guys, the entire staff, the coaches, the athletic director, have the safety of their students very much foremost in your mind. And I believe it if you say, we will require them to wear masks at all times. But frankly, it's hard to enforce something that's really not there. So that is my concern. Yes, Mark.
Hey, Jesse, just wanted to chime in here. In the fall, we went one step further than this. And in our district, we required anyone who could not tolerate a face mask, they had to have a note from their doctor, and then our doctor had to prove that. And in the fall, we did not have anyone that asked for a waiver from the face mask requirement. And actually for the winter here, Section 2 actually went one step further than the New York State requirement. And they basically instituted what we as a district instituted in the fall. So any student athlete in Section 2 is going to be required to wear a face mask. And the only way that they will not be able to is if they have a note from their doctor and it is on file and approved by their respective school physician. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Okay, but I don't see that in the document. So that is why I'm concerned that it makes it hard to enforce if it's not there. That's my concern. Samantha.
Well, and Mark, do you have a sense, like, you know, there's like a billion issues, but one issue or one frame, I guess, to look at it is there's our students interacting, which is a risk point, a link in what we would call an error chain, right, in the maritime industry when things go bad, right? So there's our students interacting, or our students and our parents interacting, but then there's our students and then Shen's students, or, you know, so with this, you know, the vagueness that Jessica, like I trust you. I trust these coaches here in front of me. Can I say the same about Shen's coaches? I have no basis for that. I mean, and I venture that like you probably would, but like not just sort of confidence, informal confidence, but like what Jesse's talking about, like what actual like enforceable safeguards, like do we trust, or shouldn't have to trust everybody else to be as diligent as you guys are clearly trying to be. So is it so vague, like what Jesse's talking about, where if they are not being as diligent as we are, do we have any repercussions?
Yeah, so the section 2 rule about that just came out the other day. So that I have about 10 different documents in front of me right now. So I don't know which document you have, and you might have one that's a day old because things have been changing by the hour. But what I can say is, we did have, low and medium risk sports, including soccer in the fall. And I think every coach and every program in the Suburban Council that we played against followed the rules in the fall. So I don't see any reason why they wouldn't in the winter. But again, I'm just going by the data I have from the fall.
Okay.
So I think, Mark, along those lines, I just know, at least from the fall, I guess the last game that we had for soccer, an opponent, to remain unnamed, had some players out there without masks on. So I'm happy to hear, and it sounded like some of the parents said it was based on medical waivers. It seemed contradictory to me, because if the person had asthma or various things that they brought up, I would have thought it would have been the exact opposite, that they should have more masks on, or for that matter, they shouldn't even be out there. But such is life. So if there is that consistency within section 2, and if the referees are empowered and the athletic directors and the coaches are empowered to be able to enforce that, that's going to be really important. And I hope that's something that these guys are able to do, because as I think's been mentioned, I don't have any problem with any of these coaches that we have on our call. I trust every single one of them. And I would certainly hope that those other districts would be in a similar boat. But being able to empower the referees and the ADs and those various folks to be able to monitor, since there won't be anyone else most likely in attendance, would be helpful to make sure that these guys would be safe if we look to move forward.
And I think obviously in the spring or in the fall, this was all new to us coming back into athletics, in the middle of a pandemic. And I think schools in section 2 learned that when the state left it vague, and there's some reasons the state left it vague, but the reason they left it vague, students just saw that as an opportunity. Well, I can't tolerate it, and I'm going to pull my mask down. And I think we as a section saw that and said, no, we're not going to allow that. There has to be a medical reason, and there has to be, that has to be in writing to allow you to not have a mask on. And like I said, we did not have any student athletes that attempted to get a note from their doctor and get our doctor's approval for that in the fall.
Thank you. Megan?
Mark, all of the fall sports were played outdoors. Is that correct? There were no fall sports played indoors.
Swimming was inside for us. That was the indoor sport in the fall for us that was inside, and we have bowling inside right now in the winter.
Bowling is held at a private business, and that private business was required to be certified with the state guidelines on the ventilation systems, correct?
Correct.
And the ventilation systems where the swimming took place, where the additional ventilation precautions for indoors took place with swimming as well?
I assume so, yes. I mean, as you know, we don't have the pool at Averill Park, so I assume so, yes.
That pool, is that a school pool at another district, or is that pool at a private business as well?
That's a Troy Middle School.
Okay.
Anne?
That said, Mark, swimming and bowling are no contact. Where even soccer, if you're any good, isn't a whole lot of contact. You're supposed to pass the ball. So the fact that there's little or no contact, you're outside, you have a lot bigger chance of staying away from each other, obviously, than in an indoor area where, again, in basketball, if you're any good, you're going for the rebound, and there's a bunch of people under the basket touching each other, and each other's faces and elbows are coming down. And I just, I find it hard to compare what we did in the fall. I mean, yes, you learned something by that, by saying, oh yeah, you have to have a doctor's note for a mask waiver. We absolutely learned something. The numbers were not nearly as high, and we were outside, which everybody knows that's better. And it's no contact. So there's, I think, way too many differences between what we did in the fall and what we're addressing here. So I just feel like this issue has to be addressed on its own merits, not what we did before.
I agree with you there. What I would like to point out is that whatever the decision is tonight, our student athletes have been, and I assume will continue to. Prior to New York State opening up, we had student athletes, whether it was right or wrong, crossing the borders to go play. Now that Rensselaer County itself has opened up, I can imagine there's going to be, AAU tournaments and travel tournaments here and in the Hudson Valley, because all those Hudson Valley counties opened up. So I guess my concern is, and what I want everyone to just, think about is, would we rather have our high-risk student athletes traveling to the Hudson Valley region, Syracuse, Buffalo, to play these high-risk sports and play with, I'm guessing if it's an outside league or an AAU or a club team, the precautions probably won't be as much as Averill Park and the Suburban Council are going to put in. So it's really, for me, it's a question, are we going to have our student athletes wear an Averill Park uniform and stay locally for the next 6 to 8 weeks? Or are they going to wear a, AAU or club or uniform and travel out of the area? So that's one of my concerns, that if,
I agree with that, Mark. That's one of the things I've been contemplating too, ever since we learned that this was opening up. But they might be doing that anyway, regardless of whether we're playing here or not. And so it still remains a concern for me. But I do understand, can we do that better than these other organizations that the kids may not participate in if we open up? And I agree, that's a good point. Megan.
I was just going to say that with the spring and fall sports, the families that I know who have athletes that play school-related sports also play for private clubs. And many of them played for multiple organizations where they could find the time. So I don't think that having this as an opportunity is a deterrent to play for another club. I actually think that opens up a broader risk to our program because of the possibility that they could be playing for multiple organizations where those criteria are perhaps not being met in the same way. I also want to say too, because this conversation is going to go on for a bit, and I want to reiterate that no one on the board has lack of trust in our coaches or the safety measures that you've set up, or our student athletes. And from the feedback that we've gotten from the community, I just want to say from the outset that there appears to be a misconception that we have a desire to prevent our students from having the best possible year they could have. And that could not be further from the truth. We want our students to have the best possible opportunities without putting their parents, their grandparents, their families, their friends, you as coaches, the teachers, the bus drivers, everyone at risk for illness, because the risk for illness is not individual to the player. So I just want to get that off my chest before we go deeper into this conversation, because there's going to be different back and forth, and I don't want anyone in the community to think that we don't want our students to have the very best. We do.
Yes. Well said, Megan. And Coach Puglisi, you had your hand up too.
I just wanted to add one thing. I'm not saying anybody's right or wrong about that topic, but to interject, it may have happened in the fall and the spring, or I'm sorry, the fall sports, they could play other teams other than the ones they were on. There is no chance a boy could play AAU during my basketball season. It's either for Averill Park or he's not playing. There is no time for that. We're going to have practice or a game virtually every day of the winter over the next month and a half. My concern is, and I put this in a public statement to the board, my concern is if we do not have a winter season, the boys basketball players in our community are going to seek out another avenue. And that other avenue is going to be AAU. They're going to be playing with far less protocol, safety measures not put in place, and they're going to travel all over the state in the states that allow them to play. And then they're coming back into our community. If they play for Averill Park this winter, they're going to be in our cohort. We're going to be playing people within our county or close thereof. We're not going to be traveling all over. There's an AAU tournament this weekend in Buffalo because Buffalo opened up. There's going to be hundreds and hundreds of kids there, unmasked on top of one another, and then coming back to their home schools. If we allow us to play, we can supervise our kids and follow the protocols to keep them safe. That's the one thing I'm not sure about. They're not going to be able to play in other sports if they're playing for our school.
Well, do we know if any of those kids are participating in Buffalo?
They're waiting to start for us tomorrow, so hopefully not.
Okay. Doug, you had your hand. Thank you. Doug, you had your hand up too.
I was just wondering if, Mark, if we're in a basketball game and the other team does not abide by the mask rules, say, how is that enforced? Is it enforced by the refs, by our coaches? How is that enforced?
Good question, Doug. It is not enforced by the referees. They have been told, just like in the fall, that the referees are not responsible for COVID protocols. That is on the host athletic director and the individual coaches of each team. But I can tell you, if a suburban council school came to Averill Park and they were not following the mask rule or any other protocol, we would not start that game, or we would stop it until they decided to follow the protocol. And if not, we just wouldn't continue the game.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ann?
Mark, I have to tell you, even with the girls that supposedly had a waiver on the soccer field in the fall, there were girls that were wearing masks, but they were below their mouth. So yeah, I have a mask on, but and they weren't just standing there and taking a breath, they were playing.
So you're talking about our team or a different team?
No, the opposing team.
So
I did not see that on any of our players.
They wouldn't have needed a waiver. We went one step further to require the waiver from our school doctor. The way the wording was written in the fall was, it was basically mask as tolerated. And that was the big issue in the fall. It was, what does as tolerated mean? We interpreted as a district and took it a step further that you had to have a doctor's note and approved by our doctor. Other school districts, as tolerated, oh, I can't breathe out there, I'm going to take it down. Well, that's why Section 2 went ahead and added the above and beyond the New York State rule that you have to have a note on file at your home school and it must be approved by the school physician.
So how come
decide to take it down this year, this winter?
So how come that's not included in Averill Park's guidance? And it still says only if they're less than 6 feet apart are they required to wear a mask? That's perplexing to me. If Section 2 is requiring that, our guidance should follow that stringent Section 2, and it does not at this point in time. Peter, do you have something?
I do. Even though my hand has just been idly wandering here. I have a couple questions about, number one, how frequently will the athletes be tested? Number two, what happens if one tests positive? What is the impact on the team? And then what is the impact on their season?
Well, I can't give you specifics on how frequently they've been tested. Jim has been on a lot of the testing emails along with Questar and everything. And I don't think we've decided if testing is allowed and we can do it as a league, how often they would be tested. I don't know if Jim, if you have any sense from the superintendents on that.
The testing protocol at this point is certainly vague. we literally found out this weekend about Questar's ability to support it. For those who don't know, it's a little bit complex in terms of how it's being done for our BOCES in our county. The LSL, the license essentially to do the testing, is owned by Questar. They went ahead and got it. Questar is our BOCES. So through that, they were able to request tests from the state DOH. The tests were originally to be used in case we got into the microcluster strategy, the 20% mandatory testing. As you know, our zone or our area or our county, whatever it was going to be, has not been designated. It doesn't appear that the state is moving in that direction anymore. It changes and we get conflicting information, but overwhelmingly the information that we're receiving is that that's not the way the state is doing it anymore. If they were following those metrics, we would have been in a zone already, probably multiple times over. They've changed the metrics a few times and we are not in one. So Questar, and this was on our call today with the Questar superintendents and the folks from Questar, announced that they would provide testing for us. They would provide the tests, which means they're licensed and they're the ones that have to report it to the state through the state system. So all that part has been worked out. In order for us to actually do the test on site, our nurses have to be able to do them. And for that, we would need orders from our medical doctor. We've been in contact with Dr. Silverman. We have not heard back definitively, but he has said that he would write the orders, which would give us the ability to do the testing perhaps, but we don't have that. He's indicated that he would. And Val and Rebecca have been our direct contact with them, so they know more about that aspect than I do. Once all that shakes down, so if we have the test from Questar, they're saying we can use them, Dr. Sullivan writes the orders, our nurses are able to do them, then we'd be able to kind of get to that next step. Suburban Council guidelines, I know, have some requirements for testing for wrestling. We would have to decide what we're doing locally in terms of either daily or weekly for the testing part. I believe the guidance is random weekly testing, but I'm not positive of that offhand. I know it's in the information we forwarded out today. I know it was suggested to be weekly. So we would at least be able to do that, and perhaps more so, but I can't give you a definitive answer on that at this point, to be honest.
Okay. So Peter, does that answer all your questions?
Didn't answer the impact on the team. If somebody tests positive, what's the protocol there? And then, well, I guess there's not going to be a great season anyway because we have a late start, but that will impact the season as well.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think from that point of view, the testing, if a student athlete tested positive, we would handle that, I would assume, just like we do any other student who's on our campus or who is reported to us by DOH in terms of the contact tracing. I'll ask Val or Rebecca. They've unfortunately become experts in working with our Department of Health on contact tracing because of the cases we've had. So they are much more informed about how that would work. I don't know if they want to jump in. I'd invite them to.
Peter, I think I was reading your mind today. I actually posed this question to the Department of Health because I figured it was going to come up at some point. And from what I was told is that it would still be looked at as a case-by-case basis. They would still look at every single thing individually, but their guidance would most likely be the same as it is with the college and the professional teams, that once one team member is positive, the whole team will most likely be quarantined.
Is that for an opposing team? I'm sorry.
Sorry about that. And it's a 10-day quarantine with an extra full 4 days of monitoring for symptoms.
Thanks, Val.
You're welcome.
Rebecca, you have something to add?
I think the other thing to recognize is the impact on the individual who tests positive. Anyone who's tested positive must undergo a cardiac evaluation and work with our trainer a full 14 days after they are void of all symptoms. So for any individual who tests positive during the sports season, they would probably be out a minimum of 24 days or a month. And when you're talking about a 6-week season, that's a pretty big hit.
Okay, thank you. Peter, does that answer all your questions now?
For now.
Okay, yeah, no, good. So Coach Puglisi, I see you. Are you going to ask a follow on the testing protocol? Because Chris, Ann, and Megan also had their hands raised. So I want to answer all the, or get all the information out on the testing protocol.
Sure, I was actually going to go back to the mask wearing, but I can wait if you
Okay.
want me to wait.
Yeah, if you don't mind, thank you.
That's fine.
So Chris, then Ann, then Megan. So go ahead, Chris. Sorry, trying to make sure everybody's covered.
Thanks, Jess. No, I appreciate it. I think one thing that may be helpful too, because I don't think, unless folks have looked at it in advance, I just want to make sure, because I know folks who may be watching this will certainly recognize several of these coaches, but I want to just make sure that we level set with anybody that's watching this. So at this point, the bowling season has begun. So that's underway. And Mark, keep me honest here. I know there were some inquiries about indoor track. Indoor track can't happen because there are no facilities that will host it at this time. So indoor track is out. And then we have the folks here, well, I'm sorry, hockey. And I think hockey, because it's a joint team there, the idea is because several of those teams are located in Albany County, until they sort things out, that one's on pause as well, if I'm not mistaken. Okay.
That's correct.
So then it's competitive cheer, who's basically doing events virtually for their events. There's boys and girls basketball, would be in basketball gym and such. And then last but not least, wrestling. Are there any other sports at this time that are being considered part of the winter parameters?
You've hit them all.
Okay, cool. So I think, and I'll definitely defer the time. I think, once everyone's been able to get their concerns and questions out there, I mean, I would like to be able to talk through kind of some of those safeguards, because I think, for us to ultimately be able to make decisions, I do know the fall's different. I think this is extremely different in that we're indoors. We had swimming there before, but I think the indoors part is the one that I think all of us are trying to get a better understanding. I think with Val's help and Rebecca's, that will be very good. And then I'm sure Rachel has some insight on it as well, based on just the profession. So I'll stop there. I know there's some others on the board that want to bring up some stuff, but I just want to make sure everyone's on the same page in terms of the sports.
Good. Thank you, Chris, for that clarification. Ann?
I actually had multi-level comment questions that are brewing around. First, I do want to say, reiterate what Jesse said in the beginning. We were provided with some very comprehensive plans and layouts, and these coaches and Section 2 and the Department of Health, really detailed and comprehensive plans to get these kids on the mat and on the court. And I do appreciate that very much. As a parent with 3 multi-season, multi-sport kids, I appreciate the effort that you put into the planning to try to make this happen for the kids. And I also appreciate the comments from the community and the support that they're giving their kids. I get it. We are all desperate to get back to that normalcy of any type. A couple of things in those notes and in those materials struck me. One of the things I believe one of the nurses mentioned when they wrote about it was the loyalty that the players feel. Now, I'm sorry if I'm not getting your opinion correct, whoever wrote it. The loyalty that the players feel to the team and to the coach. One of the things they said was a parent or a player may poo-poo what they believe to be as cold symptoms or nothing really big, no big deal, and pretend like it's nothing, not reported or whatever. And I have to tell you, shamefully, I did that with my daughter over the Christmas break. I thought she had a head cold and she had COVID. And it took my son to say, "What are you doing? Why aren't you getting tested?" for her to get tested. And fortunately, her symptoms were mild and she was only around us. And but somehow she got it. And I was like, oh, she can't taste or smell because she's stuffed up. I poo-pooed it. And as a parent, I can see that happening. And then I see the danger of that kid coming in and, infecting other people. That said, I am for a weekly testing protocol, hopefully to catch those that maybe think that whatever it is, it's allergies or it's nothing, hopefully a testing protocol would catch those on the front end. So I wanted to say that. The other thing is, I understand that this meeting tonight is about talking about and deciding on winter sports, but it really begs a much larger question in my mind that I just read before we went into this meeting from a student who was having a difficult time understanding why we are putting so much emphasis on getting kids on the court when, there's other activities, there's theater, there's singing, there's, robotics, whatever. There's a bunch of other things that a lot of other students count on for normalcy. And for those families, they say we're a family and we're a team and we're together and we need this, for our mental health. There's other kids in the district that aren't athletes that need that too. So why aren't we giving this kind of conversation and this kind of publicity and this kind of push for all of our kids? Why just the athletes? So that is not the question, obviously, for this evening's conversation, but it is a bigger question I feel like we really need to address for everybody. It's been weighing heavily on my mind. And I understand we are going back to a hybrid model, but if we can put 10 kids touching each other all over the court, why aren't we putting these kids in the classroom? So those are the things that are kind of stirring around, and I appreciate the opportunity to get them out. Thank you.
Did anybody have any responses to Ann's?
I do.
I could
Okay.
jump in too, Jesse, just if you don't mind. I think since the beginning, we've been trying to be very aware of providing opportunities for all of our students. The robotics example is a good one. Our robotics kids are coming in. They're coming in the morning already. So we have them on campus. We have opened up the drama productions. We have our choir and our band are on campus. We've done the virtual productions, working on concerts for the spring, using the football field and bleachers and seating. If you know the high school musical folks, Sarah Christie and Mike Blaustein, I think their passion for what they do certainly is equal to a rival's, the athletics folks for sure. And Heath has been working very closely with them to develop plans and opportunities. Again, they're in, even though we're virtual right now at the high school, those students are in. So we have been trying to connect as many kids as we can. The reason that we are virtual right now at the high school is by choice. Based on our numbers, the only reason we closed was due to staffing. We could staff our high school. There's no two ways about that. What we heard loud and clear from our students, from our parents, from our administrators, and from our teachers was the biggest problem at the high school was the inconsistency in the model, the flipping back and forth that we were forced to do. So when we came in after the break, instead of starting big, which is what we had done, and then closing down 9-12 and closing down 6-8 in an effort to keep K-5 open, we tried to be very responsive to that. And as a result, we started smaller with K-5 and then K-8, and now next week 9-12. So that was by choice. We could certainly staff our buildings right now, but we really wanted to provide that consistency in the model. And even with that, through the work of Heath and the high school administration team, we have approximately, last time I asked, about 80 kids coming in every day. And those kids are in our CTE programs that are actually on site. We're one of the few schools that has a CTE program. We have two actually, auto tech and construction. Those students are in. Our students who were struggling the most academically and we felt could really benefit from being in are in. As I mentioned, our robotics kids are coming in, our music chorus and band kids are in. So we are trying to bring those in. In addition, we've brought our CTE kids who are out of district going to their programs, our New Visions kids, our Tech Valley kids, our out of district special ed placements. So we've been providing those opportunities the best we can, as much as we can, in an effort to both keep K-5 open, keep K-8 open, and build up to K-12 and try and get through some of these unfortunate spikes. So that's all. I think someone else, I think Penny might have raised her hand. Oh, I think I started talking.
So.
I apologize.
I think
yes.
so too. Thank you.
Hi, I mean, I agree with Anne respectively. I do wonder where the drama is, and Dr. Franchini just explained that about the numbers and stuff. And to Anne respectively, the only reason why we're here is because we are coaches of high-risk sports. So once Cuomo put that down the line, we're only here because that's our job. So we're just trying to facilitate our job of coaches of high-risk sports. But I wholeheartedly agree with Anne. Sports is the same for the kid that drama is. Everybody has their own niche in high school, and those are just as important, whether or not they're able to facilitate those now because of the numbers or because how many kids are in school or remote. We're only here because Cuomo has now trickled down this effect of high-risk sports. So I'm just trying to relate to what she was saying.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a quick question of Mark. Scheduling of the gym.
Oh, Peter, can you hold that for a second? Because we have a couple other people who I think really want to respond to the other things. And then Megan has a question, and then Coach Puglisi has a question, and then we'll come back to you. I'm trying to just be respectful so we make sure we include everybody. Thank you. Mike, did you have something to say in regards to the other, you had raised your hand and unmuted.
No, I can wait.
Okay, so I'll put you on the list too. Thank you.
Jesse, can I grab one other one before we leave this one?
Absolutely.
I forgot in my mind was just the late buses that we also did too, which goes back to, I want to say November-ish, when we committed to bringing kids, giving kids the opportunity to stay late, stay after with teachers in order to connect academically, but also for that one-to-one connection in those small groups. And also to give our clubs, because our extracurricular advisors also very passionate about their clubs, and we support them and the opportunities they provide. We wanted to give them the ability to meet in person as well as virtually. So those clubs are running virtually, and that was an investment the district made to provide late buses and try and foster those connections in that regard too. So we even did the unprecedented step. We offered our North Greenbush and our Wine and Skill kids transportation as well, because they didn't have that option. So we've tried to expand this as much as we can to as many people as we can. Sorry.
No, good. Thank you. That's good information to have. Okay, so before we leave Anne's comments, I don't see anybody else raising their hand to respond to that. And I think Megan was next on the list.
Thank you. I had a couple of questions as it related to testing and tracing. When we're talking about the testing requirement, are these rapid tests or are these the PCR tests? Is my first question. And with either testing strategy, how far in advance of a game, meet, what have you, is the player being tested? Do we have guarantee that the other districts are following a similar testing protocol so that their team members are being tested, especially the ones that show up with a mask waiver? Have those players been tested in advance of the game? And then our nursing team has been invaluable in assisting with the tests, with the tracing of the cases in the quarantine, working well above and beyond. So are we adding additional tracing to their plate, which in my opinion would be highly unfair, to just keep heaping on to other people for picking up? Who's responsible for that?
I can talk a little bit to the testing. Jim, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they are the rapid tests, correct? Yeah, they are the rapid tests. We had talked in the Suburban Council as far as wrestling, testing the wrestlers the morning of a match. So they would come in the morning, get tested. Obviously, if someone tested positive that day, there wouldn't be a match that night until all the proper contact tracing and all of that was done. And then we'd have to see where we're at. But for wrestling, it would be the morning of a wrestling match. As far as the other sports, we haven't come to a firm conclusion how often. We really were concentrating on the sport of wrestling in the Suburban Council, but we also wanted to randomly test others, but I don't have a specific number to give you as far as how often, when, as of right now. That's something the athletic directors and the superintendents are still talking about. And I feel like you asked another question there, Megan, that I missed.
I did. It was more related to who's going to be responsible for the additional tracing, because we've already overburdened our nursing staff to assist with the tracing for the quarantines and positives that we've already got in the district. So if we're going to add more to their plate, is it going to be them, or is the county going to help with this, since they've also now passed the buck to us?
So I would say when it comes to athletics, it would be a team effort between me, Val, Rebecca, and Rachel. But I can tell you the one reason we are not in the Suburban Council, and I made this perfectly clear to my colleagues, one of the main reasons, not only because I don't think it's safe to have spectators, but one of the reasons I did not want to have spectators was, God forbid, if we had a COVID situation with spectators and our nurses are already so busy that now they've got to do contact tracing for spectators. So that is one of the main reasons that I fought very hard with my colleagues, that I didn't want to worry about having spectators. If we were able to have sports, let's concentrate on our student athletes. We can stream the games. Parents can still watch. There's not a need to have them in the gym and add that, extra what if.
Yeah, on people who are already working 24/7. Megan, were all your questions answered?
For now.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Coach Puglisi, you were the next one on the list.
I just wanted to go back and address, we were talking previously about players wearing masks, and I think we kind of went past it. I'm not sure everybody got their questions answered. I'm the Suburban Council Boys Basketball rep, and I also sit on the Section 2 Boys Basketball Committee. We've had numerous meetings from the fall up until last week, and as we get closer to being able to start a season, it's been a priority of both the Suburban Council coaches and the Section 2 Boys Basketball Coaches Committee to not only have kids wear masks, but to wear the mask properly, wear their mask over their mouth and over their nose at all times on the court. And Rachel's been at all of our open gyms. We've done 6 open gyms now at the boys basketball program. And it's a constant message from all the coaches involved that the boys have to be wearing their mask, covering their mouth and their nose, because we all heard what happened in the fall, and we do not want that to happen in the winter. We want the mask to be worn at all times and worn properly. I do not know any coach yet that is going to have a player on his team without a mask. So
to that end, Coach Puglisi, what are and I was going to ask Mr. Malenfant, Coach Malenfant, this as well, because I know that it's hard enough to exercise when you're outdoors with unlimited amounts of fresh air, wearing the mask, still being able to get that fresh air somewhat through the fabric. What are the physical stressors of wearing the mask, playing heavy, running up and down the basketball court or wrestling? And I saw the literature with the masks for the wrestlers underneath the headgear. What are the physical stressors of the player exerting that much with the mask over their face?
Well, all the research I've done and everything I've read, it's not a detriment to their health. And all we've done in our basketball workouts is we have made the boys, what I've encouraged them to do is get multiple masks. Try different masks at the workouts until they can find one that they're comfortable with and they can feel comfortable playing with. We've conditioned, so we've run, we've done drills, and they've worn the masks, and it's difficult. They're practicing to become able to do that, and it's going to be difficult, but we're going to do it. I'm going to probably, as a coach, have to substitute more than I've ever done in my career, but our priority is to get the social and emotional well-being of these student athletes, boys and girls, back into what they're comfortable doing as safely as we can, because they haven't done anything since March. This is becoming a problem for them, mental health wise, physical health wise. And now that we've gotten the okay to do so, we just have to do the best we can to make sure it's a safe atmosphere. And I can speak for everybody on this call. We're all working really hard to do that. And people just need to understand that we are doing what we say we're doing. And I think Rachel will back us up. The boys in the gym that are with us have their mask on the entire time they're there, covering their mouth and their nose. It's not like soccer in the fall. We're doing it differently.
Thank you. Coach Organ, do you have something in regards to masks?
I'd like to reiterate what Coach Puglisi just shared. Much of what Coach just said is exactly how the girls program has operated. Our players wear masks. Anticipating when we begin to practice, it is going to take some time for them to build up. I do anticipate frequent subs. Many of the girls coaches who I've spoke with in the Suburban Council, including Joe Murphy, the Suburban Council rep, are also on board with this. If their players are not going to wear their masks properly, they're not going to play. I could tell you from our program standpoint, if a player has a mask malfunction, if a player has an issue with the mask, I'm going to ask the official, or at the first available opportunity, they're going to come out. We're going to get another player in. We've emphasized to our kids that they need to bring multiple masks just to be prepared for that. And I believe that this is something that we can do. I think that Coach touched on the mental health issue. I think that's a very important thing that seems to be missing a little bit from this meeting. It is extremely important for these kids to have some form of season. I know that the length, missing, 3 weeks, 4 weeks of practice, these kids will be thrilled to have a week of practice and a game or 2 games if that's what it came down to. They're very much behind us. They're very much supportive. And if we tell them that in order for them to play, they have to follow these very strict rules, I feel confident that they're going to do it and they're going to do it well.
Thank you. Coach Malenfant, did you have something to include in regards to the masks?
Yes, in regards to the masks, the preseason or non-contact practices in my mind was a priority to get acclimated to the masks. In fact, the workouts were strenuous in order to provide the athlete with that, with that experience so that they were able to practice and play effectively. We also would have the approach to sort of wean them into the masks. We wouldn't expect them to, for example, in wrestling, wrestle a full match right away. That's a fairly strenuous activity to begin with. We would look at time intervals and, condition them to the masks. But they also, the wrestlers in the gym experience, the open gym experience, and again, Rachel can attest, they are wearing the masks and following protocol. And that's what will be expected of them throughout the season, if that's granted, and during competitions.
So can I ask all you coaches, do you guys have like your own set of written rules, or maybe not written, but laid out rules for the student athletes? Because like I said before, it's really not in our Averill Park guidance beyond if you're less than 6 feet, you have to wear a mask. So I just want to understand like how you guys approach it, because you keep saying those are the rules, but that's not what we saw as a board. So I need to understand that. Mark?
Hey, Jesse, I was going to bring this up and after the meeting, because I want to see where it's at. Can you email me the exact spot? Because I was looking through the document, and in the 3 different spots I saw talked about masks, the last sentence says, if a player is unable to tolerate a face covering for the physical activity, approval from the school district medical director is required. I'm guessing in one of the multiple spots it's listed, we must have missed that sentence, but I know in at least 3 spots it's in there.
Oh, but it says in the practice guidelines, in the mask protocol, in the game day guidelines, it says, unless engaged in physical acceptable face coverings must be worn at all times unless engaged in physical activities and at a distance at least 6 feet. So it does not say that you have to wear a mask if you're more than 6 feet.
Right, but it does in the last sentence. If you can't tolerate a face covering, the school district's medical director is required for a waiver, permission from them.
No, I understand that, but it doesn't clearly say you have to wear a mask if you're more than 6 feet. there's a caveat in there, and we could
Yeah.
probably argue this to no end, but it's not clear that you have to wear a mask at all times unless you can tolerate it. It says you have to wear a mask if you're less than 6 feet.
We can look on changing the wording, but this is the wording that was in there in the fall. And I'll just say that we didn't have a problem with it in the fall, but we can definitely look at changing the wording.
Yeah,
to
I
make
know. And that's what I started out with. It. That's in the Department of Health guidelines, as well as the New York State Public High School Athletic Association guidelines. They all have that sort of caveat in there, which in my mind is not strong enough language. That's what I'm saying. Is there any other, Coach Puglisi, in regards to mask wearing?
Yeah, just quickly, I
Megan-
don't know. I mean, I'm not sure of the board protocol, but I mean, I would think that, I don't want to speak for Mr. Bubniak, but I know all the coaches on the call would agree with me. We can change the wording of that to they mandatorily have to wear a mask when they're in the school building at all times. That's what we're doing on my program, and I know the girls' program is the same. As they enter the building, the mask comes on and doesn't come off. So they're wearing a mask all the time, whether they're within 6 feet or not, the mask is on.
Right. So that's what I was asking before. Like, you guys have your own sort of set of rules that you kind of abide by, and the student athletes know to abide by.
Correct. And we can put that in writing if you'd like us to.
Yeah.
But do other districts have that too, though?
Yeah, that is a concern of mine when it's not written down. It makes it harder to enforce. That's all.
As I said, Section 2 instituted that. That came down yesterday or the day before. So that will be in everyone's return to play in Section 2.
Okay, good.
Mark?
Go ahead. Val, did you have something to say about the masks? And then Doug, in regards to masks?
I just want people to realize that when there's a positive, it doesn't matter if you're wearing a mask or not. The Department of Health will still quarantine anybody that is in their view of who needs to be quarantined. They will not be taking the mask whether into consideration during sport time. They don't even take it into consideration at school.
Thank you. Doug?
I just wanted to ask Mark, do you see these promulgation of these regulations as evolving over the next week or so? I mean, we're talking about nuances and what's said and what's not said. I would anticipate this could be a first draft of some of these. And then over the course of the next week or so, we might see some improvements.
I can tell you that the Suburban Council document is 99% done, except adding in the new Section 2 wording. And then once the superintendents agree or give the go-ahead on testing, that part of it needs to end up in there, which will then end up in our document as well. But again, I see these documents as always evolving because we changed a little bit in the middle of the fall season as well. So if there's something that comes up, we get 3 weeks into the winter season, we say, oh, we should do that. Well, the document's going to evolve if we feel that's what's best for our student athlete in our district. So yes, to answer your question in a long-winded way, yes.
Thanks. Jesse, I do have a comment about masks.
Yep.
I always respected Coach Malafont for the work he's done with our students. And I was just blown away today by the 4-page presentation he made to us. And part of it included the masks that he has obtained, or at least is able to obtain, that go under the headgear and is held on. And there are 4 not attachment points, but 4 points of straps that hold these onto the head. There's no reason why, if he can do that with wrestling, why any other sport can't adopt a similar type of mask that would stay on during almost any activity. Mike, I want to congratulate you and thank you for that presentation today. It was most informative. You went so above and beyond the sanitary protocols that we thought about in terms of how the mats are washed down between sessions with a hospital grade disinfectant. I was just so impressed by that, and I'm impressed by your leadership in terms of helping us come up with a sanitary protocol. And also one more thing about the coaches that are here tonight. As I said at the last meeting, we have close to a shrine in our house for Coach Oregon. We just think that much of him because we think that he did so much for our relative, our granddaughter. These are more than coaches. They're teachers, and they work with our students in a different capacity than a teacher in the classroom. They help them with some of their getting along issues with other students. They help them with any mental health issues that might come up. And I've seen them in action, all of them. And I'm just so impressed by them. And I would like other students to be exposed to these people, even if it's on a short-term basis, these coaches, these teachers, these mentors, on a short-term basis for as much time as possible. That's what I want to say.
Yes, thank you, Doug. And it was a thorough presentation we had on the wrestling. Coach Malenfant, did you have more to say about the mask? You had your hand up a little bit ago, and I just want to not leave this topic until everybody has had their opportunity.
Not on the mask. I have other things I would like to address, but not the mask, Jesse.
Okay, thank you. Megan, were all your questions answered? We're going back to you because you started this big, very relevant discussion.
Sorry.
No, don't be sorry. We all need to talk it through.
I would like to say that I've always respected Mr. Malenfant for his hard work in the classroom. Seeing him in that capacity, he is an amazing teacher as well as an amazing coach. So kudos on that regard as well. In regard to somebody bringing up, and Mark, I think you had mentioned that if any team shows up to a game hosted by Averill Park and they're not prepared to follow the guidance, you would, I guess, call off the game. Does that same go conversely if we go to another school and you show up and the team is not, are you going to put our players back on the bus and say, sorry guys, we can't play because they're not going to play by the rules?
Megan, I can't imagine right now. We have kids that in throughout Section 2 in the Suburban Council and within our school district that I remember walking into the gym last March into Sean Oregon's practice on a Thursday to tell his team that their regional game was canceled and most likely their season was done. That was the most difficult, one of the most difficult, probably one of the top 3 most difficult things I've ever had to do as an administrator. And now we fast forward 10 months where these kids, the only thing they're looking to do is put on a uniform and represent their school, and some of them for the last time. And that's not just in our district, but that's in the other 14 schools within the Suburban Council. I can't in my wildest dreams imagine a student athlete or a coach in the Suburban Council that is not going to follow our Suburban Council guidelines, Section 2 guidelines, and state guidelines to a T. I really can't. And to answer your question though, if that was the case and we were the visiting school, and obviously I would be at our school because we'd have a home game. If the girls were home in basketball, the boys are away. I would anticipate, and I have complete confidence in our coaching staff, whether it's Penny, Pugs, Sean, Mike, whoever it is, or any of our JV coaches, that they would do the same thing that I would do if I was the home administrator and they were playing a home game.
Coach Oregon?
Thank you. I can tell you that if we were playing an away game and the other team was not properly wearing their masks or wearing their masks at all, I would ask the officials to stop the game and I would ask to speak with the coach, and I would say to the coach, either something has to change and your players need to wear the masks properly, or we're not going to continue this contest. Because I think that this season is well beyond winning and losing. It's about the kids, getting back out there and enjoying their opportunities, things that they might have taken for granted, 10 or 11 months ago. And if it takes us saying, okay, you're not going to follow proper protocol and you're not going to wear your masks properly and you're putting everybody at risk, we're leaving. We're getting on the bus and we're going back home. And, if it means forfeiting a contest, we don't continue to play, then that's what it means. But I'm willing to go to that level to give these kids the greatest opportunity that they can have.
Thank you. Chris, before we leave this mask topic, did you have your hand up at one point?
Yeah, thanks, Jess. It kind of ties in with some of this, but I think, especially for Val and Rebecca, and I think Rachel as well. I mean, in terms of the great work that you guys do with these guys, I mean, having been in a household where all of us tested positive, we didn't hear from Department of Health for 3 days because they're so overwhelmed with work. And I'm sure you guys are in the same position. I guess what I'd say is just, as we continue to try to evolve this, and if we do look to move forward with the sports, hopefully with those results would come, as quick a turnaround as possible and make sure that we contact trace and do some of that. So the only reason I bring it up is just because there are some wonderful folks who are working diligently at Department of Health, but the reality is that they're overwhelmed. And I'm sure everyone here that's in the administrative capacity can tell you just based on a lot of that. But I think that, if there's a positive test, I trust that ultimately we would be as a district able to try to do the best we can from a contract taste standpoint. But just, I wanted to mention that just because I think for those of us who've gone through it, it takes a little bit of time to get that turned around and to make sure that it's out there for others, because whether it's a stigma, whether it's overwhelmed in terms of the amount of work, I just wanted to mention.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Samantha, did you have something about the masks? Did I see your hand up?
I did. One sort of got answered. Just to, I don't want to second guess that mask, that really cool, the wrestling mask. I'm assuming that's more, I tried to sort of turn the picture. It's got multiple layers, right? You're not on my screen anymore, Coach Mellon, but you're there. It's got multiple layers. It's not just a thin gaiter, because I have done, anyway.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
It actually has more layers than your typical your average mask that most people are wearing today.
Okay, that's I think a lot of the guidelines are talking about paying attention to the quality of the mask and the fit, not just the sort of, hey, I'll come in. Thank you. I've got a bazillion other questions, but I'll let you move on.
Okay, we'll get there. Thank you, Samantha. Coach Puglisi, do you have something more about the mask?
Just last thing. We would be willing in the boys basketball program, if it made the board more comfortable, if there is a specific mask you guys would like my athletes to wear, I would certainly, we could purchase as a program. I could ask the families to do so. I've encouraged the boys to look into the Under Armour sports mask because that's supposedly the best one on the market right now, all the research I've done. We'd be willing to do that. The mask is going to be part of our uniform. They're going to wear it at all times above their nose and over their mouth. So that's not something we need to worry about. I mean, I've coached a lot of the people on this call's children, or they're in my program. They're like an extension of my family. I'm not going to allow them to play in an away school if the other team's not masked up. We're going to stop the game, get on the bus, and come home. Period. The end. I'm not going to put your children in jeopardy.
Good. Thank you very much. Okay, back to Megan. All your questions answered in regards to that.
For now, but Rebecca had her hand up. I think she had a comment.
Sorry, I did not see Rebecca.
That's okay. That's okay. I just want to make sure that everyone here remembers that we are wearing masks only to protect other people. That for the most part, any mask that you're going to wear that is comfortable enough to work out in isn't going to provide you any protection from the COVID-19 virus. So I think it's really important for us to recall that I have a lot of faith, and I'm one of those people who almost everybody, all the coaches here coached my kids. And I have a lot of faith in all of these coaches. I can't say that my trust runs beyond the Able Park School District at this point. And I think it's important for us to realize that when we're taking our children to other districts or having other districts come in, the masks that they're wearing are not protecting our children. And I think that we need to keep that in mind when we're even having the mask discussion.
Thank you, Rebecca. Good point. Okay, Megan, good.
I just want to, I
For
want to
right now.
thank, yes, I want to thank Rebecca for that comment, and I will table my other questions for later on.
Okay, so Peter, you are in the queue. Your time is come.
Do I have a time limit?
No, but go ahead, start your questions.
Well, yeah, it's a quick one. 5 groups are going to be using the high school gym, I assume. And I was just wondering how the scheduling is going to work to allow at least some time for some basic cleaning. I assume that there's going to be adequate ventilation in there, which, as we all know, there usually isn't. What's going to be provided to accommodate that spacing?
So each program is going to be given a 2-hour time slot. Each team, I should say, not program. Each team. The one thing that has helped us a little bit with gym availability this season is at this point we're not allowing any outside groups to come in and use our facilities. So in past years we would have to be out of Algonquin in the high school by 6:30. That's not the case. We could have a 6:30 to 8:30 practice. So it enables us to spread out our teams. For example, in the high school gym, there in the years past, we may have the varsity boys practicing on the main court and the JV boys practicing on the back court, which we call court number 3 there. This year, we're not going to have that second team there so that we have less student athletes in the gym at any one time. They're given a 2-hour time slot, but what I'm encouraging the coaches is to go about 1 hour and 45 minutes. That way they can clear out before the next group comes in, and we're not passing each other or waiting in the lobby for the next group to come out. We have two sets of gym doors at the high school. They come in the one door closest to the concession stand where the temperature scanner is. Rachel's usually there. They get temperature scan there. The other team that's leaving, they're leaving out the other doors. We're not using any locker rooms. The only time we would be using a locker room is if a student, it was their in-person day at school. So they were a hybrid student, it's their in-person day, and they have practice right after school. So they're not going home in between practice. That would be the only time they would be going into the locker room. So in actuality, there's going to be less people using a locker room in the winter season than there was in the fall season. We will also be using both gyms at Algonquin as well. We'll have 3 basketball teams using the high school gym with 3 time slots, 3 basketball teams using the newer gym at Algonquin with 3 time slots. And then the cheerleaders will have their own space in the older gym at Algonquin, and our wrestlers will be in the wrestling room, as you saw Mike's map that he provided for you. So we feel like we have good spots, no overlap or anything for all of our teams to practice safely.
Thank you.
You good for the time being?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, Coach Malenfant, you were next in the queue.
Thank you. First, I really would like to express my appreciation to the administration and the Board of Education for including the coaches in this dialogue and also opening it up to the public at large. That's really appreciated, to have an all-inclusive conversation. I appreciate that. Also, I'd like to recognize the other varsity level coach, Jamie Hanlon, who had a lot to do with drafting that document that we sent to you. And hopefully that was clear. And if you have any questions regarding that, we'd be happy to answer that. From a wrestling perspective, I'll back up a minute. I support the approval of any program, not just athletics, that can provide a safe environment for our students. And I know someone mentioned that earlier in regards to the rest of the school population. I have 4 children, 2 that graduated and 2 that are in high school now, and we have an array of interests, athletics, arts, drama, music. So we recognize that all students are important, and I certainly recognize and I support, as long as it's safe, the implementation of those programs. Specifically about wrestling, and wrestling has been discussed here already extensively, but at first glance, you would think wrestling, in this current world would be very risky, but we're actually in a good place in terms of safety. We can implement our program only interacting with one other teammate in a contact environment. As you saw by the diagrams, we can accommodate the spacing. We have the air ventilation. We have a nice facility for this particular situation. And, that's, the contact is there, obviously, and there are some, other conditions we may have to worry about in wrestling, like, skin contact type issues. But as far as the airborne nature of COVID, we can practice with only one other person. And the same is, it's true of contests as well. Dual meets, you only compete against one other person. And so in reality, we could only have a handful of contacts within 6 feet. But I do welcome the testing procedure, if that is possible to lay out as another layer of safety. We're very conscious about hygiene and sanitation in our room, as indicated on the safety protocol: mopping, hand sanitizing, body wipes. We purchase those every year through the athletic department, and we recognize that that's a needed effort in our program. So it's a believe it or not, but wrestling is actually there's a minimal contact in terms of 6 feet spacing in the wrestling program. But some other things that I would like to mention, and I believe Coach Organ said it earlier, this is not about a league title or a sectional title or state title. We just want to provide the kids safe activities to engage in a positive outlet. I know that there was discussion about students participating in other activities otherwise, but we would know from 2:30 to 4:30 and on the evenings of contests that those kids are with us under strict protocol and under supervision. And that time that they're with us, they're not somewhere elsewhere, and that we can't monitor. And I think we know that sometimes kids slip up outside of school, and unfortunately, there are consequences for that. I believe this could be a learning experience for them, giving them the trust and the responsibility to be able to follow through, to learn. If we don't give them the opportunity to learn, they won't. We need to trust them. And I think that's an important piece of educating students, not just about sports, but teaching them responsibility, and they'll certainly have the opportunity to do that. But again, I'd really thank you. I can only tell you, I just received the text probably about a half hour ago. I believe that Tamarack approved wrestling under some testing guidelines, I believe. It's not confirmed, but they're starting to think about how to do it safely. And I'm pretty sure that Tamarack is in terms of Rensselaer County, and maybe others will follow. But again, I really appreciate your listening and your considering. I know it's a lot to think about, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. And we're happy to have you guys all here to be able to discuss this thoroughly. And I certainly agree, like Megan stated earlier, all of us are on the board do really care much about all our students' social, emotional well-being. And that's not what this is about. Unfortunately, with this pandemic, my concern is it affects way more than the students. It affects our entire community. And so that keeps running around in my head. Thank you. Samantha, I think you were next in the queue.
I had a couple things, but I did want to just go back to something that I thought I heard, and I want to be 100% sure, because
Sure.
kind of seems like a big deal. I think it was Mark, correct me if I'm wrong. Did I get this? Because again, there's like a bunch of the emails going in my head, and then there's like, you know, the distancing, there's the kids, then there's the parents. Did I hear you say that spectators, that this is all predicated on a no spectator situation, or did I interpret that wrong?
So in the Suburban Council, I can't remember what part of this, because like I said, the Suburban Council document is not completed, but we at least agreed that for the first half of the season, there would be no spectators, and we would reevaluate with the superintendents at that point. But if we were to be playing a game in 2 weeks, there would not be any spectators at that game. That is correct.
Okay, that's because that would sort of be, you know, especially based on what, you know, Jesse's concerns that she's talking about, is that not that the kids are not at risk, and not that I don't care about their health. And I've actually have seen some numbers that the incidences for young people is actually increasing at the same rate that adults. So we've sort of been living in this world where, oh, the kids are probably going to be okay. And it feels, you know, a little less like it, like that. But is there, I'm sort of looking at this like a spectrum, right? Where at one end is normal play, you know, a full roster of teams, a full stadium of fans, and then like practices, and then nothing, right? So there's along that line, right? And so I know that you guys have been doing workouts, and that sounds like that's going very well, and it's helped inform where you guys are going with this. And so, you know, you're saying the document is evolving. Do you feel like within the next 6-7 weeks that it can progress on that spectrum? So if you do feel like, you know, uncomfortable with, you know, other schools in the with, you know, Tamarack, say you're not comfortable with what Tamarack's doing, that you could dial it back, still give them an experience, and not have to call it off entirely? Like, is there flexibility to have different points along the spectrum? Does that make sense?
No, I kind of get what you're saying. And I guess part of me is because, and again, it might be because I've been an athletic administrator for 11 years and I've worked with these colleagues in the Suburban Council for the past 7 years, that I have and worked with these other schools, and Jim and Matt and Michael have as well, and Kim, that I think we have complete confidence in the other administrations that everything will be followed to a T. However, I do get what you were saying, and everything is flexible this year. I do the scheduling for the Suburban Council. I'm in charge of scheduling every game at every level for boys and girls in the entire Suburban Council. And I actually did an interview with Channel 10 today about how we were going to be very flexible in the Suburban Council. So right now, Rensselaer County has been approved. There's 3 schools in the Suburban Council in Rensselaer County. Obviously, they all, I think only 2 of them are requesting board approval. One has just got, yeah, you're okay to go. Saratoga or Schenectady County went below their 4% threshold today. So those 2 schools, Niskayuna and Schenectady, are today ready to go pending their board approval. And we believe, if the people that are telling us this information are accurate, that Saratoga County by the weekend may be below the 4%. Albany County, still a little bit away for them. We have multiple schedules in the Suburban Council ready to go based on, okay, if it's just Rensselaer and Schenectady County, and then if we add in Saratoga County, and then ultimately in a couple of weeks, hopefully Albany County, to get all 15 schools going. So I know that's not the exact question you're asking, but the word of this entire winter season is flexibility. And I think all of us would be as flexible as needed to give the kids the best possible experience.
Jesse, can I ask another question? Kind of managing variables, obviously, and you guys, none of us have ever, and I just applaud you guys seriously for thinking around the corners with all of this, because, you know, who would have ever thought you had to do this? And so I appreciate what you guys are doing. And so, kind of given, and I appreciate kind of the respect that you have in the in the suburban council there. But there, when you talk about if we could ship everybody off to Disney World like the NBA, right? Then it would be like, thumbs up, right? Who's got the money for that except the NBA? So I know that like the student athletes have a code of conduct. Is that the kind of thing that we could bring to bear here, where if you are going to do this, it's less about their interaction on the mat and more about their interaction over the weekend, and then they bring that to the mat or they bring that to the gym. And so, I may be overstepping. It sounds like the kids, and I get it. The kids are really raring to go for this, but adding that to the code of conduct and then kind of holding them accountable for that, because that's the big variable there is you guys, score, everybody else score, ventilation, masks, all of it. And then, one person slips up and.
No, I agree. Last night at 6:30, I sat in a Google Meet with the girls basketball program, and we had that Coach Organ was in there, Coach Keegan and Coach Acker, along with the prospective JV and varsity girl basketball players. And we had that exact conversation. Again, I might be more of a trusting guy than some people, but the conversations I have with parents and our student athletes throughout the past 10 months and how I see them and how excited they've gotten in the past few weeks, I really don't think we are going to have issues with them obeying protocols. And to your point about the bubble, that goes back to what I said earlier. We can't have it's not like the NBA. We're not going to Disney World. As much as I'd like to go to Disney World, that's not going to happen. But what we can do is keep our kids in a 15 school suburban council bubble. If we decide not to have sports at Averill Park, what we can't control is them going to a New York State bubble, which is all regions of the state, mask, no mask, who knows what's going on. I just feel like we can have a small bubble here, and it's much more controllable than them going all over the place. One other thing I want to say is that we've been doing, obviously everyone that's involved in athletics has been doing a lot of research. There's 48 other states that are currently playing basketball. I don't have the specific wrestling number offhand, but I know there's 48 states that are currently playing basketball right now. The two that are not, Hawaii postponed their season, and Illinois is in talks to start up in the next couple of weeks. So it could be 49 of 50. Now, there are some states that aren't wearing masks. So I'm going to disregard those states. But I will say from all the literature that I have seen, that those states that are wearing masks, there has not been community spread or spread through a basketball game or basketball practice. For those states that are wearing masks, I can't speak for the ones that are not wearing masks.
So I think I saw a communication today in all the information we were given that said that high school athletics, there has been spread because of this. Did I misread something?
From the emails today?
Yes.
There might have been something on the CDC that showed that students were tracking similar to adults. And then.
No, this was in regard specifically to athletics.
Like, I know, Jesse, I read an article the other day, like there was spread through a wrestling event in Florida. But what I would say to that is there was major spread at two events that I saw. One was in Florida, one was in Louisiana, both wrestling. Neither had masks on, and both were large tournament style things with 20 to 30 high schools gathering at one time, which is obviously we will be wearing masks, and we are not looking to compete against any more than one school at a time.
Right. Rebecca, you're unmuted. Did you have something?
No, I'm sorry. I guess I just forgot to mute.
Okay. Coach Organ?
And that is the situation that Coach Puglisi was referring to earlier, where if winter sports is not approved, our fear is that our kids are going to go into other areas where there are not strict protocols and not like what we would have within a suburban council, and especially here at Averill Park. And so it actually becomes an increased risk. I think that's what our fear is.
Certainly. We're all taking that into consideration. Thank you.
Can
Megan?
we just confirm one more time which counties are included in the suburban council? Am I correct that it is Rensselaer, Albany, Columbia, Greene, Schenectady, and Saratoga?
Nope. There's 4 counties in the suburban council. You have Rensselaer County, which has Troy, Columbia, and Averill Park. You have Schenectady County, which has Niskayuna and Schenectady. Saratoga County, which has Saratoga, Shenendehowa, Burnt Hills, and Ballston Spa. And then in Albany County, Bethlehem, Guilderland, Shaker, North Colony, CBA, and Albany.
So it's not even all schools in those counties. It's just schools that have signed up with that council within those counties. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. Like in Rensselaer County, we have there's schools in our county that belong to 3 other leagues that aren't the suburban council. You know, Maple Hill and Rensselaer in the Patroon Conference. You've got Lansingburg in the Colonial. You've got Tamarack and Hoosick Valley and Hoosick Falls up in the Wasserin League.
So Tamarack is not part of the suburban council then?
Correct.
Okay. Do we know what the other councils are doing? Are they mirroring what suburban council is doing?
So I don't like to toot our own horn, but I will here, and that usually the suburban council, we are far and ahead of any other league when it comes to protocols or handbooks or scheduling or whatever the case may be. I think you're going to see a lot of other leagues, because they have their hands on it already, with our suburban council document that now says Patroon Conference or Wasserin League or Colonial Council on it. But as far as every other league is looking to participate this winter, every school in the suburban council is looking to participate in the sport of basketball and competitive cheerleading. And I would say at least half are looking to participate in wrestling at the same time. And that's just in our league, but the sense from other leagues is that they are all looking to start up and get going as soon as possible. In fact, I know a couple of the schools in Schenectady County, because they went below the 4% threshold, they were planning on having practice today, except unfortunately for those kids, it ended up being a go home early day. So they missed their first day of practice.
So to that point with the 4% threshold, for those schools, if they were to have a situation where they go above that 4%, is that an automatic hard stop?
It's interesting. That's a question that's been asked, and because that's an individual county decision, because each county made that rule. Not every county has that rule. Obviously in Rensselaer County, we don't. And there's a lot of counties in the state that don't. And that question's been asked. It hasn't been answered yet. And Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, but back when we were talking about going to school, it was, you could go back and I could have the numbers wrong here, but go back if you were under 5%. But if you worked, the positivity rate worked itself all the way up to 9%, then you would have to close down or go remote. So we're not sure yet for those other counties. They haven't really specified what happens if you start and then it goes to 4.1 and then back down to 3.9 the next day, then up to 4.2, then down to 3.8. That would be tough on teams. So I don't have an answer for that one.
So, but currently,
sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Currently, Rensselaer County is at 5%. So Rensselaer County doesn't have a rule that 5% is too high. Is that what you're saying? So we don't really care about that?
Correct. In Rensselaer County's guidance, They approved high-risk school sports to start. Every county had certain stipulations. Some had more than others. Some had none. Some had a lot. I think as of today, the state has been updating a map every day of the county approvals. I think we're up to like 43 of the 60 some counties in the state that have approved athletics to begin, and another 10 of those had stipulations that they could begin if this happened.
Okay, sorry, Megan.
43 of the 57 counties outside of the boroughs have approved winter sports, high-risk winter sports.
Megan, you had something else?
So I was going to ask if that was on a 7-day rolling average, because like realistically it could be, it could be 4.3 and then it could be 3, like based on whichever daily positive. Is that 4% based on a 7-day rolling average? Is that what the guidance was?
I can't speak for every county, but I believe for Schenectady, Saratoga, and Albany County, it was the 7-day rolling average.
Okay. And we don't know of the 43 other counties that have approved sports within their purview what the criteria was. So we don't know if they've got a set testing schedule or requirement, or who pays for that, or we don't know any of the particulars that surround that. We just know that they've opened it up.
You're on mute, Mark.
You're muted, Mark. I'm sorry.
Sorry. I'm looking up right now. As of right now, it looks like about, I wish they said how many, the exact number here, but they don't. But out of all the counties that were approved, it looks like about 8 or 9 of them had a stipulation in there, whether there had to be a positivity rate had to be this, and then the rest of them, they just approved it. And they said, hey, you can go ahead. There wasn't any stipulations.
Jesse, can I interrupt 1 second?
Sure.
To give you some breaking news, we are going to close school tomorrow for a snow day. So I know we have a lot of people watching, so that message is going out right now, but just thought I'd throw that out there. So we are closed tomorrow, traditional snow day, no virtual or remote classes.
Thank you. Samantha, did you have all your questions answered?
I mean, sort of. I'm sort of like a Captain Obvious, just in terms of like kind of reiterating, obviously the masks, the spectators, the code of conduct, right? So there are kind of these multiple layers in place. And then, the only thing I guess 2 things that I didn't hit on is first, again, just sort of like the chain of command, right? So is there language, and there may not be, and I trust, when Coach Palese said he's going to put folks back on the bus, I appreciate that. Not that I want that to happen, but to have that authority and that the wherewithal to do that. And then in the bigger picture, is it, Mr. Bubniak, are you, if at some point it's like, we gotta shut this down, either it's, our positivity rate or positivity rates in our participating schools, where does that authority lie? Who has the ultimate decision to say, sorry guys, we did what we could, it's over, or head over to practice? And can that be delineated somehow? Because, yeah.
Samantha, if you look at the resolution, once we get there, the resolution, item number 3 in the resolution designates that authority to our superintendent.
Okay.
I was just about to say, if Dr. Franchini tells me to do something, that's what we're gonna do. So
Well,
listen.
I read that. That was the first thing I read, and then I read all the other stuff after. So
Yeah, so the weight is on his shoulders.
you know,
Similar to
he's got other
the
stuff
board,
going on.
for the board's purposes, similar to with the reopening plan and the MOAs that we did, it kind of gave the discretion of the superintendent during these unprecedented times to act. It's generally in the scope anyway, but if you remember some of the stuff that Jeff gave us, it kind of extended that because of the territory we were in. So the MOA, as Jesse pointed out, number 3, Jeff wrote in there, our attorney, our school attorney, that's in there as a kind of a stopgap emergency brake to pull. So
yeah,
and it's similar to the fall season when there was some issues that popped up, and myself, Val, Rebecca, Rachel, Jim, Mike, Matt, we would all talk and we'd do what was best. And there was times where we had to cancel a game or we had to go on pause for a little bit, and we managed to get through it.
The only other thing that I would say is, I know one of the parent comments that came in, that was kind of one of the most convincing, was really taking the holistic view, was looking at kind of data that they had in their own, that they had acquired in their own life. And then just that acceptance of, we may have to change behavior in our household to make this happen. And so that would be the kind of expectation that I would expect. And it sounds like that's the expectation that you all have of your student athletes. And so that's the expectation that I would have from the school community, of that if this is something that goes forward, that behavior outside of school will have to, maybe it doesn't have to shift. Maybe you're like, my family, we can't go anywhere. But to tie those things together, I think it is very important. And there were a couple of parents who wrote in very succinctly in that regard. So I just wanted to highlight that commentary.
Yes, they were. Okay. Samantha, does that take care of your questions?
I think so.
Okay.
I've been taking notes, so.
Good, thank you. Peter?
Yeah, I would, just to follow up on that, if any one thing is going to pull a team together, I think it's following the guidelines to preserve their season. So as was pointed out by Coach Organ and others, that this is a teaching moment. I think they really need to look at what they want to do and have to do to preserve their season. I know also, and this is sort of directed toward Coach Malenfant, I know there are a few other districts that are waiting to see what we do, especially in regard to wrestling. I do have some connections in that community and have been to a few matches, as you may have noticed. The one challenge, I think, is going to be the referees, because I know that in the wrestling community, there are quite a few who are opting out of refereeing wrestling matches. And that's a concern, I think, beyond the students. It's something we don't have control over, but I think it emphasizes the concern that that community has for the safety. And I have to congratulate Coach Malenfant on the extent of what the planning that was put together in an excellent document that I just quickly looked through, because I didn't have a lot of time to read the materials that were pulled together for today's meeting. I think it's a good plan. I really do. I was skeptical coming into this, but my confidence has been restored. Thank you, Coach. Actually, all the coaches. I think you've done an excellent job.
I agree, Peter.
I have a
Thank you.
question as it relates to the students' mental health and the team dynamic, because obviously you all have done your homework and put together a pretty comprehensive plan on how to keep yourselves and our students safe. Clearly, I think we all have reiterated that none of us have a whole lot of faith in anybody outside of our community and what their protocols are. I'm wondering what the mental health benefit would be for our teams to work so hard and practice so hard and follow every guideline and follow every rule and get a phone call the day of the game that the team they're playing against got a positive and they're all quarantined and they still can't play. Or that, you know, we've had through no fault of their own. So like there's another side of the coin here. And so I would like the coaches to touch on for me, because I remember back in March having to tell my Odyssey team that we were shutting down Odyssey and they weren't going to get to do their competition. I understand that's not sports, but it's still a team activity and they were still going to go and compete and they didn't get to. And this year that hasn't even been discussed. And I remember the tears involved in that discussion. So I wonder, you know, how many times are we going to have these disappointing conversations? And are there merits to you guys operating as a team and functioning as a team, but not competing? Can we talk about that?
I think Coach Puglisi, then Coach Malenfant, from what I'm seeing in hands.
Well, to piggyback on what Ms. Hicks said, we can help in so many ways, not only in our school building, but in the community. Every single time we've had our open gyms, I've started with the group and spoke about, we help control what each one of us is going to get to accomplish. If we're doing things outside of the time we're together that we're not supposed to do, that's going to impact everyone. One thing I've addressed with them in a half kidding fashion, but truthfully, Super Bowl parties. Super Bowl parties could spike our numbers like Christmas, Thanksgiving, and New Year's did.
Right,
If we
but just to your
our
point, and
kids,
I don't want to interrupt,
Oh,
but
you
it's
did.
not but it's not about your team. I'm talking about the team you're supposed to play.
I know. I was just addressing what we can do for our community because that's what we're here for. So if we can help curb that spread by the kids that are with us, that's going to impact it. I trust the people we coach against. They're also educators in schools and suburban council. I feel like they'll do the same thing. I mean, those are big things. And the thing about sports to me as a coach, I try to relay to my kids, we can only control what we control. So if we can't play our opponent because they've had a COVID situation, that's something we have to learn from. That's something we have to deal from in life. I mean, life's not fair. I mean, I tell the kids all the time, half kidding, but seriously, to me, fair is where there's fancy rides and we judge cows and pigs. We have to control what we can, whether it's fair or not. If we can't play our next opponent, we're going to move on to prepare for the next one. That's part of life. There's going to be struggles. There's going to be obstacles. We have to get through them and do the best we can.
Thank you, Coach Malenfant.
Well, to answer that question, they would be disappointed. You know, there's no doubt about it. They would be let down and disappointed. But I feel that is a great opportunity for growth. You know, how to deal with that disappointment, how to manage it, being able to relate that to everyday life disappointments. I think it really is, in a lot of ways, a great opportunity, even though, you know, it would be upsetting, obviously, to the students not to be able to play their sport or be involved in their activity. But I also think that they would respect the opportunity. I don't think that, you know, I think that they would at least be thankful that they were given a chance and an opportunity, and understanding that there will be ups and downs and disappointments and even closure possibly, depending on if someone has a case or not. And again, I think another opportunity for growth to, to work with the entire community and be trusted in that way. But, I think we all know currently, coaches, and I've talked to the other coaches in recent weeks, we're dealing with depression. We are counseling currently. We're talking students out of the possibility of quitting school. We're trying to counsel them academically. They're not engaged in school. And, I think, it certainly does provide an opportunity to help them and be closer to them and to counsel them and guide them through the issues that we're dealing with. But it's certainly an unpredictable, environment, but, we're certainly going to be there to support them.
Thank you.
To the second
ahead.
part of my question, though, is there any merit to functioning as a team and participating in team activities to get them involved as a team, but not to compete? Talk to me about that.
But not what, excuse me?
Not to compete. So to take the other schools out of the equation, but you'd still be able to work together as a team, do skill building individually, maybe, build, physical wellness, and still have that family dynamic that you get when you function as a team, but not compete.
Megan, it just, in my notes, I had written down like an intramural framework for the same thing.
I realize it would not be the same, but I'm asking for your input as coaches, how you feel that, would that be beneficial, or would that be detrimental? Would that be counterintuitive to what we're trying to do?
Yeah, I think it would. I think that, students and student athletes really, want to engage in that competitive atmosphere. It's what they're training for. It's what they're used to in this particular setting. I think it would be disappointing, and I would guess that maybe even several would not want to do it, would not want to engage consistently in an intramural format, and we could potentially lose students, just based on that particular guideline. So, I understand what you're saying, though, in terms of competition. You would have less contact. You wouldn't have to, worry about other protocols from other schools. And, that's something that we're going to have to, as a community, Suburban Council community, follow the protocol and, abide by the rules.
I think Coach Spence and then Coach Organ had additional comments to Megan's question. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, for competitive cheer, we're almost in a situation where we're not actually competing the normal style we would, where we'd be at a school and hundreds of people and screaming us on and watching everybody's routine. We're actually going into it like across the country is doing right now for cheer. We compete virtual. So they're actually in a situation where they're only being videoed, and then that just goes in front of a panel of judges so we're not actually going to be even face to face with a competitor. But for the girls, they're just so ecstatic just to get on the mat, just to do what they love, even if it's not remotely close to what our normal season would be. They're just so thankful to have the opportunity just to put a uniform on, even if it's not the exact same protocol that we've always had for this sport. They see it's just an opportunity to get back on the mat, compete in the sport that they put so many years into, especially for seniors. But we're definitely seeing our sport across the country. Everybody's going virtual for competitions. So, but I think it's detrimental to them to just have the opportunity to get back out there.
I have a friend whose son is a gymnast and they're doing it the same way, like from their competition perspective. So I'm familiar with that format.
Yeah, and it's pretty much across the country. That's what's going on right now in the sport. It's for everybody's going virtual. You're just competing. Video after video is rolled, and the judges just judge on that. But it's something. And at this point in this crazy pandemic, we'll take it because you have to take every opportunity that you can right now and make it a big deal, because it is a big deal to the kids.
Yes, thank you, Coach Organ, and then Ann.
Thank you. I support what Coach Malenfant just stated. I think that an intramural format would be very disappointing to our kids and their families. And I think that we would run the risk of losing kids. I know that, many student athletes, go to school, they're doing better academically because they have that opportunity to come in and compete, and they want to put on that uniform. And if you introduce more of an intramural setting to that, I think that would be very disappointing to our kids and their families.
Thank you, Ann. And then we'll go to Doug. I saw your hand go up, Doug.
Risk of cutting this meeting short, I just want to summarize how my feelings have evolved from when I started reading all the materials, or a couple of days ago when the conversation started. Like Peter, I was skeptical, particularly with wrestling, not knowing much about the sport. When Max Temple went through, we were all watching intently. He was a classmate of my daughter's. So, but not really understanding the sport and just seeing it as very close. I couldn't imagine a way that it could be done safely. So I'm really impressed with the materials that came to us and explained some of the cleaning and safety protocols that happen. And of course, my son played basketball for a long time and I was familiar with that. But as we have talked about all the plans and the safety protocols that have come through, I feel a lot more comfortable. And I do know, being the parent of 3 student athletes, that these kids don't want to just practice. They don't want to scrimmage each other. They want to represent their school. And part of, what the coaches are saying, representing their school, putting on that uniform, the pride in their school and in their team, I think carries over into the academics. And ultimately, we all know that's the most important thing. I feel comfortable with, there was a parental consent that was sent to us. It was very detailed, and I'm happy with that. And I'm happy with knowing that if there's a positive case, there's going to be, contact tracing and quarantining, just like there is in school. It's not like they're getting special, accommodations or anything. With those in place, I feel comfortable supporting this because I do feel like I see it in my own family, the mental health of these kids. My son lost his senior year in college, his baseball season and senior year in college. My daughter lost her track season her first track season last spring. I have another daughter who does indoor right now who's missing it. I see the toll that it's taking on just my kids, and I'm sure it's school-wide. So giving them that opportunity, and like I believe it was Coach Puglisi said, life's not fair, and they need to learn to deal with these disappointments, especially if it's something that is due to a teammate that maybe made a wrong choice, or maybe another team did. It's all part of the learning process, working together for a common goal. So I feel confident that these protocols and plans that they put forth and they continue to work on and sculpt into as perfect as possible. The kids need this normalcy, and I feel like we're protecting them the most we can. I mean, yeah, we can put them in a bubble and put them in a corner and they're going to be perfectly safe and fine. but they're going to lose their minds. So it's like, we have to find that balance. And if you're looking for us to vote, you know, we have to consider more than just, it's up to the parent to decide if this is, if they're comfortable with their student athlete continuing with this, and they're signing off on that. The coaches and the administration and the district has done everything that I can see possible to make it a safe and enriching experience. So I think I've heard all I need to hear. So thank you again. I really appreciate all the input from everyone. It's been really helpful and very comprehensive, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Anne. I agree. It's been completely comprehensive, well thought out, and putting the concerns of the student athletes first. Doug.
The sports events are really community events. And Penny raised an interesting concept. Could we live stream some of our games so that community, because there's no spectators, the community could at least participate? We could show them that we're active and we're taking those precautions. Live stream like we are doing with board meetings.
Doug, we are ready to do that. In fact, as part of our subscription to Huddle, we just installed a Huddle camera in the gym. So we will be able to, any event that goes on in our main gymnasium at the high school, we will be able to stream, varsity or JV, we will be able to stream out live on YouTube at no cost, no subscription or anything like that. It'll just be out on a YouTube link for anybody to be able to watch. And almost, I believe every school in the suburban council also has the ability to stream games from their main gymnasium. So whether it's a home game or an away game, our basketball parents or wrestling parents will be able to watch their sons and daughters compete.
That's great, Mark. Could you make sure that that link is well advertised?
I will definitely. I do want to go back to one thing about spectators. This was in the Suburban Council document, but I wanted to make everyone aware. And this was from talking to our superintendents as well. One of the things we did put in there is that on senior night and senior night only, the home team, their seniors can have 2 guests there for a senior night. So that if we have 4 seniors on a team, we would have 8 parents spaced out in one set of bleachers for that one game for their son or daughter's senior ceremony. I just wanted to make sure that was out there. It wasn't the documents, but I wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Yeah. I guess my greatest concern is this is a little bit bigger than just our student athletes. But that being said, Anne brings up, Val, do you have something?
Just want to point out about the quarantining issue. Our student athletes are students and they're going to be in the building. And if we're quarantining a student and a team, we're still going to be quarantining in a classroom as well. So one positive student on one team could potentially affect all the other teams if they share a classroom. And then we go above and beyond, and we also do C contacts. So there's a potential for a lot of quarantining for one positive student, just for people to keep that in mind, that it's not just going to be the team, it's going to be the kids in the classroom, and then it's going to be the C contacts or siblings that are in other buildings.
Thank you for that reminder. Mark, did you have something else?
No, I'm good for now. Thank you.
Okay. So I want to, Megan.
I really just kind of wanted to hear from Val and Rebecca what their professional opinions are about the risks involved. Obviously, we're all in support. Clearly, the coaches care about their students. We all care about the students. I want to hear about the reservations that Val and Rebecca have as our medical professionals in the buildings who face our sick staff and children on a daily basis.
Don't both raise your hands at once.
Yeah, this is uncharted territory. There are very few studies that have been done. Unfortunately, the studies that have been done had variables that we're hoping to eliminate, such as the studies were done on teams without masks. We know that the masks our students are wearing are not protective to them. I think it's important to remember that this is not a virus that's transmitted by touching one another. It's a virus that's transmitted in the air in microscopic particles that small exposures we seem to be able to deal with, but repeated exposures we've seen in our own district can take out several people at once. I think it's important to remember that every time we have a kid who's positive, Val and I and the other nurses hold our breaths that that kid isn't going to give COVID to one of our physically challenged children in the building. They're not going to take it home and give it to their father who's had a heart attack. All that being said, I think the psychosocial emotional component of this is very important. I stood before the board probably 15 years ago and begged that sports weren't cut because it was well proven that the best way to keep teen pregnancy at bay was to have students involved in sports. As a public health nurse, I know that that's kind of like the last thing that's on the minds of any of the coaches here, but that's an issue. And it breaks my heart that kids can't play sports. I mean, what I do on Friday night is go to basketball games in the middle of the winter. I miss that too. I've stood on the street corner and held up signs trying to save sports because our sports, as someone said here tonight, are our community. That's what our community does. We go to the school, we go to the play, we go to the musical, we go to the game. But these are very difficult times and very difficult decisions. And I just want to be sure that people are aware that we are taking a risk. And I guess we have to weigh that risk in relation to the educational process. We are in the education business. I think we need to put that first, but part of education is learning all the things we learn when we're part of a team. So, you know, I can't say that I feel strongly that we need to have sports. I can't say I feel strongly that we don't need to have, that we shouldn't. I think that we just need to recognize that there's a risk and a liability. And I know it's going to be a very, very difficult decision for the board to make. And I'm glad I'm not a board member.
Thank you, Rebecca. Val, did you have anything to add to that?
I want what's safe for the kids, but I'm not going to lie. It's very scary to think about doing all of this inside and being very close. So.
Thank you. Coach Puglisi, then Samantha, and then Coach Organ.
Really brief. I mean, it sounds like we're getting close to a close here. Before we do decide, I mean, I think we do have to keep in mind, you know, not overstepping my bounds, but there's 48 states playing. I don't want to speak for Coach Spence and Coach Malafont, but the transmission rate amongst boys and girls basketball going on in the United States right now is exceptionally, exceptionally low. It's below 1%. There's 43 out of 57 counties in New York State that have approved high-risk winter sports. I feel like we're trying to reinvent the wheel a little bit. I mean, we're trying to do what's best for our kids. I get that. But I mean, most everybody else is doing it successfully. The protocols, Mr. Bubniak and Rachel and our school districts put in place, I think we have to trust the process and give these kids an opportunity. Their parents can opt out if they don't feel comfortable for their kids playing. And I do understand that might affect other community members, but the parents of these children have obviously decided to move forward with these sports. They've registered their kids at a very high number. I think everybody's willing to give it a try. The rest of the country has, the rest of New York State appears to. I think we really do need to at least give these kids an opportunity. That's just my 2 cents.
Thank you. And I agree, but it does affect the whole community too. Okay, so then it was Samantha, then Coach Oregon, and then I think maybe Doug raised his hand. I'm not sure. No, okay.
And forgive me if this is, I definitely don't mean to micromanage. It kind of happened to us. The timing, right? The timing of the test is important, where we have a 91-year-old in our bubble, right? So I understand that, there's that. I was told when I thought I had to take a test to not actually take it at my first convenience, right? I could have gotten on a Monday, but they said, no, wait till Wednesday because it's more accurate. So I saw that I've heard the numbers, at least for basketball, say between 7 and 14 games. And I assume that the timing of testing or transmissibility or whatever is part of that. And I mean, is less more kind of the thing. If we're testing wrestlers, right? Are we testing them if they had a meet and we're testing them 2 days later? Is that test worthwhile? Is that going to give us accurate information? But are the meets not that close together? Too many numbers going through my head. But does the math work? How's that?
I would say in wrestling, because they don't, in a normal season, they don't participate in as many matches as a basketball team would go in games. We are probably, because wrestling also needs more practices to start the season than basketball does. Basketball and cheer need 6 practices prior to their first competition. Wrestling needs 10. So you're going to see there's going to be more time in between wrestling matches. There probably will not be more than 2 wrestling matches a week. There may be 3 basketball games in a week, though.
Does that answer your question, Samantha?
Yeah, I think it did, just again, so that the timing that if they're here, I'm going to defer to Rebecca. She's going to have it.
Scientifically, the statistics show that testing every 3 days is the optimum spacing.
Thank you. Question answered, Samantha? Okay. Coach Oregon.
Thank you. I'd first like to say thank you for the board. Thank you for the administration for having this meeting tonight, giving us the opportunity to speak. I'd really like to thank our nursing staff, Val, Rebecca. The work that you guys have done with Rachel has been extraordinary. And Ms. Everett, we miss you very much also at those home games. There's been a lot of discussion tonight about masks, but I think it's important to remember that masks are only part of the solution here. We have the daily health screenings. Even when a student who is not in school that day with their cohort, they still have to take those screenings. Their temperatures are taken multiple times a day. COVID tests, if administered, are going to add another layer of screening and help us in that regard. Our athletic trainer, Rachel, has done a fantastic job. She's very active in the gym. And for that matter, so is our athletic director, Mr. Bubniak. He is very active in that gym. And, on top of the coaching staff, there's more supervision now, at least in the open gyms, than there ever has been, which I think adds to the safety of our student athletes. My staff, Coach Pugs, all right, I'm sure Coach Malenfant, we clean, we hand sanitize, we give hand washing breaks, we sanitize the balls multiple times, during practice or these open gyms. And we're not forcing these kids to play. We're here advocating for them. Anybody who doesn't feel comfortable playing did not sign up, and their parents have withdrawn them. And, I think that, it's important to understand that, these kids need this more now than I think that they ever have, or at least since I've been coaching here at April Park.
Thank you. Okay, so I want to ask one more time, any board members have any other questions or want anything else clarified?
Just on the testing piece, because we keep coming back to it. Am I clear that we don't actually have a plan on testing except for as it relates to the wrestling program?
We don't have a definitive plan within the suburban council right now. So no, the answer is no to that, because things have been changing so rapidly with superintendents as Jim mentioned, our tests are with Questar, where the others are with their counties. So that is still one of the things. And that's why Jim said that document, that suburban council document, wasn't done yet, because that was the major piece that still had to be finalized.
Jim, did you have something to add to that?
To agree with Mark, not only from the suburban council side, but the BOCES side and the Questar side. So just kind of a two-pronged task to take on. So Mark will probably end up working more with the suburban council in terms of the athletic directors and the Rensselaer County athletic directors. My role would be more with the Questar superintendents and the Questar itself in terms of the testing protocols that they'll be able to support. And then, of course, Val and Rebecca, who would be on the front lines of that with Rachel in terms of getting the orders and working with Dr. Silverman. So that is definitely right on my list here as I'm looking at it. The testing plan or protocol to me is probably the largest piece of this that's undecided. And that's just because of how fast this is moving right now. There's a bunch of districts that are having meetings. There's a few tonight, I believe. Tamarack was already mentioned. I believe there was at least one or two others just in our county that had meetings tonight. I know a bunch are happening in our county and in the suburban council over the next few days. So the information has been changing. So that is something that we'll definitely have to focus on if the board approves it to work on that testing plan in greater detail.
So what is the preferred testing plan then, since we're being asked to vote on something without an integral part of the piece of the puzzle. So what is the plan that you all are pushing for as it relates to this for testing?
I can tell you in the suburban council from the athletic directors, we would like to, at the very least, I'm not saying more, but at the very least, test our wrestlers the morning of each of their matches, and then randomly test the other sports, so basketball and cheer, and then if ice hockey ever got going. I don't know what the number is as far as randomly how often doing that, but at the very least, wrestlers the morning of their matches, and then the other sports randomly. I don't know if Jim has any more to add to that.
I don't. I think that's probably where we are in the superintendent group, is with the wrestlers being more often, probably before matches is probably the key part there. And then with the other players hitting some form of a certain percentage per week across the student athlete spectrum. So.
Sorry. I was just going to add, we don't expect to have many positive cases. Again, with our screening tool, anybody who has symptoms is supposed to stay home. And I'm not sure if you saw the article from Albany County that was in the Times Union about a week ago, with, I think it was Albany, Shaker, Bethlehem Gym, and Waterville, where I forget how many tests they did, and there wasn't one positive. So hopefully we don't anticipate getting any positives. But that's just where we're at.
Does it make sense to test the cheer team who has no interaction with any other public other than themselves, and their program can essentially be performed on an almost completely distance basis? I mean, I've watched competitive cheer. You're not really touching each other that much. Like, if we were going to utilize resources for testing, do we really need to subject the cheer participants to testing when those tests could be utilized to more frequently test the basketball players who are going to be legitimately exposed more frequently.
I would agree with that because I think our contact is severely less than the two other sports. We only come in close contact for stunting, which we do and we will be doing for safety reasons only in increments of 5 minutes. That's it. A majority of our practice is actually the panel mats are almost 5.5 feet wide. A lot of our routine is jumping and tumbling and separated. So we have the least amount of contact from both sports. So I would agree that if the testing does come, maybe push it towards basketball for frequency than us, which will have such less contact in those two sports.
That's a good point, Megan. And I would just like to add that I'm not sure with Questar's situation, but I can tell you that there's a handful of schools in the suburban council that right now are sitting on thousands of tests that are going to expire within the next month or two. So their choice is to either put those tests to good use, and if we start sports back up, use them on these student athletes, or they just end up expiring.
Do our directors of nursing have anything to add to that testing?
Well, we need the doctor's orders.
Right.
And we need to be involved in the planning because a registered nurse or a doctor or a nurse practitioner are the only ones who can actually administer the test. Nobody else can, and that is a New York State requirement. So this would require a lot of our time as well.
Once the test is performed, there's a very clear and delineated process for reporting those results to the state in a very timely manner. So there is the support required from IT people. I think that there will also be a question raised by parents of children who are not involved in sports as to why we would be providing free testing to our athletes and not to other individuals in the buildings. Especially when on a daily basis, we send home many children and require that their parents take them to a physician for either an alternative diagnosis or a negative COVID test prior to returning to school. In some ways, that's mixing metaphors because the children who are being sent out are symptomatic, and our protocol requires that we're testing people who are asymptomatic. But I think that that is a question that a parent may raise to the board as to why we can provide testing to our athletes and not to our other students.
Thank you. Jim, did you have something to add?
Just before you leave that, we've referenced the coalition of local health departments that put together the guidance before. Now, Rensselaer County is not part of that. So what I do know is that the coalition document of the local DOHs has as their guideline states that districts should consider testing all involved with a high-risk sport on a weekly basis. So that was just the very general guidance that came from the multi-county coalition. So all high-risk athletes on a weekly basis.
Thank you. Board members, are all your questions answered? Okay, thank you. And I do want to say again, thank you all for your thoroughness, all the information you have provided, all the input, anecdotal and beyond factual. I think it's all relevant and it's all important. Okay, since we seem like our questions are answered, but because, like as Samantha pointed out before, there was a lot of information thrown at us today, I am going to read item number 4, the resolution to approve winter high-risk sports. Whereas on January 22nd, 2021, the governor and the New York State Health Department authorized schools to operate certain higher risk winter sports effective February 1st, 2021, as may be permitted and authorized by local county health departments. And whereas the New York State Department of Health subsequently issued updated guidelines for the operation of sports and recreation related to higher risk winter sports. And whereas the New York State Public High School Athletic Association and Section 2 have issued revised guidelines for return to interscholastic athletics for the 2020-21 season. And whereas on January 28th, 2021, Rensselaer County Executive Stephen F. McLaughlin and Public Health Director Mary Fran Wachunas approved schools within Rensselaer County to operate winter high-risk sports should schools wish to participate in one or more winter high-risk sports. And whereas the superintendent of schools has shared with the board the plan to provide winter high-risk sports in accordance with all applicable New York State Department of Health, Rensselaer County Department of Health, and any applicable league health and safety requirements which will be implemented during all practices and games. It is therefore resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education of the Averill Park Central School District hereby approves the following. Number 1, implement the following interscholastic sports for the 2021 winter season. Participate in athletic competitions in the following sports and levels: girls basketball, JV and varsity; boys basketball, JV and varsity; competitive cheer, JV and or varsity, depending on the numbers; wrestling, JV and varsity; skills development sessions and inter-squad only scrimmages in the following sports and levels: boys basketball modified, girls basketball modified; non-contact training workouts, wrestling modified. We are waiting for further guidance on the following sport: hockey, varsity, and we will participate if Albany County high-risk sports participate. Practices, skill development sessions, and or non-contact training workouts will begin on February 1st, 2021, or as soon thereafter as practicable. Athletic competitions will either be as part of the Suburban Council or as part of a Rensselaer County League. Number 2, each parent or guardian must sign a district school developed COVID-19 informed consent for participation form that is issued by the district. And number 3, the board delegates to and authorizes the superintendent to take any action he deems necessary and appropriate to ensure that such sports are implemented in a safe manner, consistent with all guidelines, New York State, county, and section. This includes the authority to temporarily suspend district participation in any of the above sports if the superintendent deems such actions necessary. Do I have a motion to approve this resolution?
I do.
Peter.
So moved.
Okay, Doug makes a motion, Peter seconds. I'm hoping we don't have any discussion because we just had that. So I will ask that when we do our voting, the yays and the nays, just keep your hands up so we can make sure we have an accurate count. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Peter, Doug, Chris, Samantha, and Ann. Thank you. All those opposed? Myself and Megan. So the resolution passes. We appreciate your time, coaches, staff, for being here tonight. I think, like I said before, great information was shared. We know you have the students' well-being in the forefront of your minds, and that is certainly appreciated. Good luck out there. Make us proud, and most of all, be safe. That leads us to our last item on the agenda, which is to adjourn this meeting. And I do need a motion to do that too. Chris, seconded by Megan. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone. Again, much